Actually, I'll put marker Hikaru Vidit. Okay, so first game we're going to look at was played 7 days ago between Hikaru Nakamura and Vidit from India. Hikaru was white, and they played Ruy Lopez. And this position, I've been espousing that if white wants to get an advantage, white should play d3. And the regular Berlin, where you get to the Berlin endgame, is castles, knight e4, d4, knight d6, and all these trades happen. And this position has occurred thousands of times, between stronger players. And in my opinion, which I guess Nippon Nishi doesn't agree with, this is fine for black, and this isn't a good way for white to try to win. However, Jan Nippon Nishi did win from this position in this tournament with white. So I've been espousing that white should play d3 in this position. And that's what Hikaru played. Okay. When I'm black in this position, I usually play d6, g6, bishop g7, which isn't very good. And I lost a game in the Pro Chess League to Fabiano Caruana. At some point between moves 12 and 17, I just hung a pawn. I was pawn down for nothing and got crushed. Not the fault of the opening, but okay. So bishop c5 is the most common move. c3, castles, d6, h3, which prevents black from ever playing bishop g4 or knight g4. Although when I say ever, it happened pretty soon. Okay, now, in double king pawn openings, often in Italian and Ruy Lopez positions, we often see white play knight d2, knight f1, knight g3, very common maneuver. And sometimes we see black playing knight e7, knight g6. And especially with the bishop on b5, this is nice because we can play c6 and kick the bishop and control the center. The drawback of playing knight e7 too early is it gives up defensive e5 and d4, so white plays d4. So we like to play knight e7, but we're afraid of d4. However, Vidit has coaches and computers and has a lot of preparation and has decided knight e7 is fine. And if black has his druthers, he'll play c6, knight g6, and black's position's perfectly reasonable. So Hikaru plays d4. And one thing I tell my students, and I've mentioned it on the stream also, when you have an e4, e5 opening, if white plays d4 and attacks the bishop, there's two things black can do. Black can retreat the bishop, or black can take and play bishop b4 check. So if the white king is on e1, you take, and play bishop b4 check. And when the white king is castled, you play bishop b6. So there's the right way, the wrong way, then there's Vidit's way. Vidit didn't do any of that. Vidit ignored his bishop attack and played a counterattack with c6. And the critical line, in my opinion, but I guess not in Hikaru's opinion, his opinion is more important than mine, is to take the bishop and then take the pawn. And the engine says white is slightly better, but what's going to happen is black is either going to win this pawn and have an approximately equal game, or black is not going to win that pawn and white's better. And in my opinion, that's what white should do. My opinion's probably not too important. Okay, And the engine says what Hikaru did and this move are about equivalent. Of course, I don't have the supercomputers they have and seconds analyzing these variations forever. So, just my personal opinion. Okay, white played bishop d3, and black played bishop to b6. And typically, if black plays knight g6, then there's no reason to suspect that white has any advantage. Black's position perfectly reasonable. The engine doesn't like what Hikaru did and says that black equalizes and prefers the slow buildup of knight b2, rook e1, knight f1. But Hikaru tries to refute knight e7 and takes the pawn. And white's a pawn up. And I don't want to say obviously, but obviously this is part of Vidit's preparation, and it's not part of Hikaru's preparation, which you can tell by the clock times. Hikaru has used 40 minutes, and Vidit has used no time. So we're in Vidit's preparation, and it has to be Vidit's preparation because the following move that black plays is crazy, and it's the only move that equalizes. So this must be in Vidit's preparation. Otherwise, he wouldn't play knight e7, because this would be good for white. And he played bishop takes h3, which obviously, and you can see that he's used almost no time on his clock, so he's still in his prep. Okay, now the idea of bishop takes h3 is it takes a pawn, so if white wants to refute this move, white has to take on h3. And when I was watching the game live, I thought black would play queen d6 or queen c7 attacking the knight would move away, and black would play queen g3 check. And I figured that was home preparation. And of course, my thoughts watching the game were wrong, because if you play queen d6 or queen c7, white plays bishop f4, and black has no follow-up. So what black would have done if Hikaru had taken on h3 is he would have played queen b8 with the same ideas. So if the knight goes to f3, we play queen g3 check, queen takes h3 check, and even though white is a piece ahead, the engine says black is completely winning. You can see this problem here. And white's king is no good. White's pieces are terrible, and so forth. The engine says black is +4. So, okay. And now the idea of queen b8 is if white plays the aforementioned bishop f4, black will play bishop c7 and get his piece back. And the engine says this is approximately equal. It's very complicated. White has many different ways to play, and I'm sure this is part of Vidit's preparation. So Hikaru made what I think is a mistake, and unfortunately, due to the fact that he had less time and he was surprised, he made a series of mistakes. So Hikaru played knight c4, which is not good. Bishop g4. F3 is illegal because you would capture the king, but you still wouldn't play f3 because never play f3. Okay, so white played queen c2, which is correct. And black played bishop c7, which is correct. Okay, and now in this position, material is equal, but you can see white's development is lagging, and black has all of his pieces out. And if you look at the king side, black has lots of pieces on the king side, and white has 0. So, all these pieces are not good at defending the white king, which is the cause of white's downfall. And not only did Hikaru attempt to win a pawn with knight takes e5 a few moves ago, he attempts to win a pawn again with the same e5 square. Okay, so he played e5, which is barely playable. Knight d7, Hikaru takes the pawn, and now king h8. And this is an example of something I've talked about before, especially with my students, but I've talked about it on stream, where a player who doesn't see very much makes the right move, the player who sees a lot makes the wrong move, and the engine that sees everything plays the right move like the lower rated player. So in this instance, Hikaru being really good at chess hurt him. Okay, Hikaru should have played queen e4. And Hikaru saw queen e4, I guarantee it. That attacks the bishop, and if the bishop moves away, queen h4 would be annoying. And Hikaru didn't play queen e4 because black plays f5, attacking the queen and attacking the bishop. And Hikaru saw, if he takes on passant, knight takes f6, and black is winning. Attacking the queen and the bishop, defends the bishop, etc. So Hikaru said, I can't play queen e4 because f5 is too strong. The engine says, not so fast. The engine says, after queen e4, f5, Hikaru can sacrifice a piece. And even though we have 3 ways to capture on f5, we have to capture with the bishop because the bishop's hanging. Then we check, and king g8 and bishop h7 are both possible. The engine says, after king g8, black is better. After bishop h7, white is better. After bishop h7, we play bishop g5 with big attack here. We can't play rook f7 because of e6. So we have to play rook e8 and then rook to d1. And you can see White's got a lot going on for a piece. White's got huge pressure. And the engine actually prefers white here. So after queen h4 check, Vidit should play king g8, bishop g5 again. Now we can play rook f7 or rook e8. Rook f7 is better. And then we can play knight d6 or rook d1. Knight d6 is best. And there's a crazy computer line which gives black the advantage. But it's crazy. It's knight takes e5. Bishop takes e7. The idea is if black takes on e7, this bishop is going to be hanging at the end. For example, takes. So after bishop e7, the computer says queen d7 is the best move. Knight takes f7, and now knight g6 is the best move. And somehow, even though white is up a rook, it's very difficult to save these pieces. And the engine prefers black. And it's possible this is Vidit's prep. Possible. And if it's not, I don't know if Vidit's finding this with black. But it might be his prep. So then he's finding it. And I assume Hikaru thought queen e4, f5. Okay, I can't do that. But that is what he should do. And if black can figure his way out of the complications, black will have an advantage. And either Vidit knew it beforehand and knows he can get out of the complications, or I don't know. I don't know what would have happened. Anyway, Hikaru played bishop d3, b5 attacking the knight, and knight takes e5, attacking the bishop. And black is obviously better here because material is equal and white hasn't developed his queen side yet. And in this position, Hikaru made the losing move. The only way to play and not lose is to take on g4, and then play g3. And obviously, if I had white, I would not want to play this. So I understand Hikaru didn't want to play this because this looks terrible for white. White's king is exposed. White has no development. And black's knight on g4 and bishop on c7. I can try queen d5 to h5. I can try f5, f4, and black's better. So Hikaru knew this position wasn't good for white, but unfortunately, what he did was worse. He played bishop e2, and now black played very forcefully the rest of the game and actually won pretty quickly. Black played f5, which is an excellent move, and black's attack is too strong. Black's attacking on the king side, and white's queenside pieces can't help. Played f4, which is another mistake. The best move is knight takes g4, f takes g4, and black's winning, but that's less losing than what Hikaru did. Now this diagonal's open, so he ignored his knight on e5 and played bishop b6. And in this position, Hikaru played a move most people would never consider. According to the engine, it doesn't matter what he does, he's completely lost. The most obvious move is to take the knight, might as well be up a knight, and then black plays knight d5, attacking the knight again, and black will later play queen g5, attacking the knight again, and if possible f4, and white's position's collapsing. The engine says black is +5. So after bishop b6, Hikaru played a very unusual defense, king f2. And we can pause for a second and look at the clock. Vidit has 44 minutes, and Hikaru has less than 13 minutes. And we're on move 20, and Hikaru's white. And usually Hikaru's not behind on the clock, and he's almost never way behind on the clock, and in time trouble so early. Okay, black played knight d5, which is the best move. Rook h1 check. Once again, Vidit played the engine move. Kramnik said it was suspicious. King g8. F takes e5. Queen g5. Similar to the last thing I said, except now white has a little more protection of e3. King e1, setting up for the next game. And unfortunately for white, very unfortunately, material is equal. So black got this position without sacrificing. And anybody would realize black is winning here. So the only hope is that maybe black messes it up. But with the time situation, doesn't look like black's going to mess it up. Bishop takes g4, queen takes, takes. It's still equal material, but obviously white's losing. Queen g5 is a nice move. Every move wins, but queen g5 is nice because this is quite annoying. He allowed the discovered check by playing b3. The most obvious move to me is knight to d2, and then we play knight c4. The most obvious move to me is rook d1, and then we simply win by taking. And if rook takes, rook d8. Black is a piece ahead. In fact, the engine says it's mate in 6. I was just going to be a piece up, but if I can have mate in 6, I guess that's better. Okay, so instead of knight d2, he played b3, knight f1 check, discovered check, and now Hikaru resigned because the logical move, king b2, the reason he played b3, loses to knight g3, and black's going to be up a lot of material and still have an attack against white's king. The knight doesn't really have a good square. So Vidit wins and played a fantastic game, fantastic preparation, and beating, somebody who was unbeatable. Hikaru hasn't lost in a long time in a slow game. And so to win with black in such powerful fashion is really, really good for Vidit.